بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
They say San Jose.
But the Mexicans say San Jose, yeah?
Yeah, in Mexican Spanish, the J is. This is way far from Mexican Spanish, believe me. This is Não Tão Pão, Joãozinho. That's a little.
Spaniards did colonize this area, though, right?
Yep, we're standing on or riding on the land that once belonged to the King of Spain. And the King of Spain used to sell by hectares, which is a Muslim way of dividing pasture land.
Is that right?
And all they cared about was cows. They didn't want mining, gold, right? They didn't care about gold. They didn't care about the wood, timber. All they cared about was gold. Are you filming this?
Yeah.
Professor Bilal says they just cared about flat land. That's why they left the forest. They didn't mess around with mining or anything like that. No agriculture, hardly any agriculture at all. They used to route the cows out of the foothills with grassland, slaughter them on the spot, make carne seca, which means dry meat, most of which they disposed of, rendered the fat into soap, and just dried out the hides, loaded them on ship. That was the main commerce for everything.
So they were interested in taking over the water holes and everything, or controlling the water supplies.
Flat land, water supplies, which they learned from the Muslims. It's the qanat or the canal system, which is still alive and well in northern New Mexico, I noticed. I'm talking about early Californian history. All of the fountains in a central courtyard, a walled central courtyard of adobe, is southern Spanish architecture, not northern Spanish architecture. It's very important because southern Spain, Valencia and Andalus and all the other Algarve in southern Portugal was the most Islamic area for the 700 years. And they learned more about agricultural terms and architecture, 8-pointed windows, the wrought iron, metal work, the grills, and all of it. The governor was called alcalde with a C, which comes from al-Qadi. That's what I am, by the way, a judge. Yeah, I can declare this whole mission haram. Especially you and the camera.
Right.
I know that's Aino Shaitan. The eye of Satan.
Better turn it off then.
That's what the Wahhabis say.
Yeah.
All cameras, Except, of course, when the government wants to go in and make a brochure and show off, then it's okay, right?
Now, Zainab said that there's no such thing as Spanish architecture, right? That it's all Moorish.
Yes, that's true. Technically speaking, the Visigoths, who inhabited Spain before the Muslims or the Moors, Al-Morro, Morisco. I remember Morisco means Moorish. Occupied Spain in the year 619. General Tariq, after which the mountain Jabal Tariq, which we call Gibraltar.
Yes. Right.
Actually, you British call Gibraltar. Jabal Tariq crossed the straits, which you can get across, by the way, in a barge. It's no problem. When they got across there were hairy, unsophisticated, mead-drinking descendants of the Vikings. This is the western branch that took over you know, the Roman Empire, and they were called Visigoths. They are cousins, the Vandals, and the Berserks, by the way, tell you enough about these people.
Is this where our two words come from these days?
Berserk and Vandal.
That they were...
Those are two Germanic tribes.
Heavily into violence? Do you think they really were, or is it just...
No, you know, the Romans called them, coined these words. They were just invaders, like any other invaders.
Like any society that
invades,
wants to
and the victims called them. Yeah. But they were pretty hairy Vikings, and they had nothing like the sophistication and especially learning. Visigoths, you know what Visigoth means? It means Western Goths.
Would you say that there's a danger in sort of, you know, in attributing many of the advances in society to Islam, where Islam is known to actually, you know, take and develop the principles and thus sort of Islamicize them? Would you say that, you know?
I'll tell you a secret on camera.
We're talking to Bilal Abdul Salam here, by the way.
My address.
Former Imam of the San Jose Mosque.
Very former.
For sure.
What I learned about westernized, conquered, inferiority complexed, is that a word? Muslims of today, is that since they're defeated, decayed, and decrepit, and totally colonized civilization, psychologically they have to, you know, they have to, there's a word for it, they have to look into their past in order to balance the harsh realities of a defeated and decrepit civilization. So it makes them feel good. You know, it's kind of a feel-good Islamic history. Look how great we were. Well, the obvious question to anyone with sense is, what happened? That's the point.
But that's happened in many societies, the Egyptian society. Or...
God promised in the Quran, if I may quote, that how many civilizations have we destroyed before you? Think, in other words, contemplate. This is a sign that God is...
You're going to put it in fourth or not?
Oh, where's fourth?
Straight down.
Oh dear, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I didn't know I wasn't in fourth.
Continue, brother.
I'm living in Islamic history, which is one of my favorite subjects. Oh God.
Have we lost them yet? No, 85, Saratoga. We're headed for Carmel today.
Oh God, they smushed us. They're not turning.
Oh, where are they?
They're going straight ahead. I know that wasn't the way.
Well, they're not stopping at
Oh,
leaders again.
Oh, darn it. I hate this. That's not, it says Santa Cruz. I should have known they wouldn't do that. Okay, how do you turn this off? Oh dear, you should have told me that fourth year before. I thought I wasn't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it runs okay. It's the red panel, isn't it?
Alright.
The red zone.
Where was I? Visigoths? Oh, Islamic history? Yeah, it's a sham. It's feel-good Islam. And it's one of the symptoms of a totally decrepit and defeated society, and its people have to supplement their feelings of inferiority and conquest by, you know, sort of indulging, I won't say wallowing, indulging in the glories of the past. Naturally, it means nothing if there isn't some kind of continuum, but very few people, except the intellectual elite, ask themselves what happened and how can we fix it.
So, how come this feeling has, you know, taken over so much of, you know, society or whatever, that they feel inferior. I mean, if they have something that's genuine and valuable, and it obviously is, so how come they're getting such a bad rap all the time?
Because they lost. They lost the Sultan in 1918. In 200 years prior to that, they began to lose ground.
When you say they, what do you mean they?
The Muslims into the Dar al-Islam began to lose militarily, intellectually, and spiritually. 100 years ago, 90% of the Egyptians... Fourth. Thank you. Were card-carrying members of some Islamic tariqah. And now the situation is reversed. 10% of the Muslims may belong to some type of Islamic Sufi orders, and it's usually the lower, quote unquote, the lower orders of the society, the servants.
Now, why would you say there's been a move away from the tariqah? Because people have died out.
Yes, that's part of it. A slow natural decline of the civilization. Are you looking for the sheikh? I can't see him.
I'm looking this way. Yeah, we'll get there.
I don't want to get into cause and effect, but it's natural for a dying civilization, like a dying and decrepit human body, to lose its soul, lose its spiritual efficacy. And that is what happened to both the outer structure of Islamic society once it lost its inner spiritual essence, which are the Sufi, which is Sufism embodied in what we call Turuq Sufiya, Sufi orders. Once those began to decline, some of them were bought off, some of them were westernized, some of them became too worldly, some of them became dynasties, like father and son, silsila. All kinds of things happened to them.
So you're saying that the process of transmission from murad to mureed became
corrupted
because it was becoming, society is changing so much that people weren't willing to tread the path?
Well, I hate to get into cause and effect. It's a mistake.
Okay,
you were looking at history.
It's happened. We can look at it. It happened.
Yeah, but like a dying body, once its soul. Okay.
See it?
Well, I have to get to 17. Once a human being loses its soul, loses its spiritual essence, it begins to die. And dying spiritually ultimately results physically, and that's what happened. I mean, people blame the British or the French for invading Muslim lands and destroying Islamic civilization. But one must ask oneself, ultimately, what allowed the British to what allowed Napoleon Bonaparte to just march right in with his horses and make manure on the rugs inside the Azhar Mosque on his way to Mecca, by the way, which thank God he never made it. And he declared himself Muslims and said, "We are the true Muslims." I mean,
did he said that?
Oh yeah. And he dressed in Muslim robes. Napoleon Bonaparte was, an idiot. I mean, what Napoleon Bonaparte was the product of the French Revolution, which is ultimately must be pinpointed as the beginning, one of the beginnings of the sickness that is 20th century civilization.
Well, anyone that would instigate a rule, which I believe in Belgium gives priority to traffic from the right, that's pretty clever.
And so
on a major road, you pull out to the right. And apparently that was because his army got stuck in a side turning somewhere.
Well, what he did in the Middle East was even more insane and not known to many European historians. Because that was the beginning of the end. 1798, check me on that, was the beginning of the end for what we call the Middle East, Islamic civilization. Because what happened was Muslims were so asleep, they woke up one day to find Napoleon, the French generals in the mosque of Azhar, declaring himself the Sultan and all that. They had remembered Europeans as these dirty, smelly marauders, they called them, who cut men, women, and children in Jerusalem from the Crusades and lost. They were amazed to turn around 200 years later, 300, 400 years later, to find these same bimbos as masters of the world. Masters of technology, which had been passed on to them. So it's a double insult. So that's what's wrong with wallowing in the glories of past achievements of Islamic civilization. And what's even more repellent is Arab modernists who are really nationalists in Islamic disguise, extolling the glories of the Umayyad dynasty and Abdul Rahman II and all that. They always harp on Abdul Rahman II, someone who wasn't a drunk, and I won't say this on camera, what else they did in their private baths. It was started by the glorious Muawiyah, and this is even more repellent. The Umayyad dynasty only lasted a century.
Wow. Yeah, I just finished watching the series I, Claudius. I'm sure you're familiar with that one on TV.
I am.
Yeah. The Roman Empire was just as...
Well, they were Byzantines in Islamic disguise, is what they were, and they were awful. And Abdurrahman II was the only one that was clean. So in all you little mosques around here that speak Arabic, that are nationalists in Islamic disguise, I won't name the mosques. I won't tell you the address. Just use your name. Yeah. Islam for Arabs and all that nonsense. What they don't understand is that the Ottoman dynasty was the longest living dynasty since the Roman Empire. It lasted 5 centuries, 1299 approximately to 1923, which made it exactly last twice as long as the British Empire. Oh, you're British, excuse me.
It's okay. I'm a Muslim.
What about the Moors? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the Arab nationalists don't understand.
I just want to find out, in proportion to number. Well, it happens.
I mean, they controlled everything from Algeria to the Indian Ocean.
Who's that?
The Ottomans.
What about the Moors?
Into China. That was a small empire. It lasted
Moorish
long.
Empire?
It was a small empire. That was small. We're talking about all of North Africa, all of Central Asia, the whole of the Middle East, the Balkans up to Vienna. We're talking about all the trade routes around Africa to the Indian Ocean and into North India and Afghanistan. And it was a glorious and wonderful civilization that was the height of their culture, of Islamic culture.
So apart from wallowing in the wonders of bygone ages, there is certainly a lot of advancement that came from the Islamic empire, and came out from Quran and its interpretations. Can you give some examples?
For people that came from Islamic countries, it's one thing. For converts, however, it's quite another. This is the genius. The genius. You're interrupting. The genius of Idris Shah was to show Westerners their Islamic roots.
People accept Islam, they don't convert.
Their Islamic roots. You don't convert to Islam in a vacuum.
You.
Are you still interrupting me?
I'm just saying language. It's a question of language. One word.
You can correct my language later.
Well, I wasn't converted.
These two are good friends. They're not really arguing.
We're not really arguing.
No.
I mean, you were
We used to be
converted
neighbors.
to Islam? Somebody convinced you to accept Islam.
That was the last paragraph. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You can
I
edit
was
it out.
now going to go to the stage of
The Islamic roots are extremely important. I'll tell you why Islamic roots are important for Westerners and to understand what European Islam is. European Islam is Andalusia. European Islam is the Baltics. European Islam is Switzerland. Switzerland. The initial intrusions of Arab, mostly. How do Europeans filter Islamic civilization? And enormous contributions.
Guns and hard times and whatever.
It's what.
Okay, how do they do it?
How do they borrow the best of Islamic civilization, like silk and paper and gunpowder and science and on and on, the whole list, and still look at Muslims as crude, backward people? This is how they do it. It's called what I call historical amnesia. Let me give you an example. Farabi was a son of a Venetian merchant in the 1500s, I think, and his father did brisk business in Tunis because Venice was a separate city-state that kind of went on its own to take advantage of Islamic civilization, thus Venice. And Fibonacci was grew up to be a brilliant mathematician, invented the Fibonacci series in mathematics. And his mathematics teacher was an Arab, by the way, who taught him 1, 2, 3 in Arabic, not Roman numerals. Well, he goes back to Venice, starts the wiping out Roman numerals for merchants on the book. The church gets wind of it, makes a papal bull that anyone who doesn't divide, subtract in Roman numerals, have you gone through that? Use Roman numerals in its ledgers will be executed.
Oh, that's a good deterrent. So why is it important, what the numbers look like?
Oh, because, what they call Arabic numerals led to tremendous advantages in commerce and technology.
The numerical system is still in Roman numerals.
It's awful. It's just divide anything or multiply anything in Roman numerals and you will go nuts. And the use of zero, there's a whole...
But the use of zero was an invention from the Arabian world, isn't it?
That's right.
The Islamic world. The whole concept of a non-number.
Right. All those advances were brought in by Fibonacci into the Christian world, which they tried to suppress. The merchants cheated. It was such an effective system. Now, this explains to you how this is an example of how the Christian world filters out the sources of its technical advances. It's called historical amnesia. Now, what Idris Shah did...
You call it historical amnesia.
I call it historical amnesia. What Idris Shah did is reminded Western people of their Islamic roots in Western civilization, right?
Yeah.
We're basically European or European derived, and to break this filter down, you realize that troubadours and the Renaissance and European civilization is Islamic civilization.
Yes.
And that's a real shocker. That was politically incorrect, especially when the European civilization was under the control of the church.
You're in third again.
I am? Sorry. So to break down that filtration system between the Islamic world and the Christian world is psychologically extremely important. It has a devastating effect.
How
on
do you
Europeans.
think something like that could be best accomplished in, like, you know, I mean, we're here in America. We have a lot of freedoms that other countries don't have. We don't have so much weight of, you know, the conditioning of years to put up with. So there is possibility, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you see? Do you see like, you know, some really popular, you know, Islamic things which sort of lead people back to, or you know, what's your idea about how things like that might be reaccomplished?
No Islamic conferences. Other than Tariqah is this. I hate to admit this because it puts a lot of responsibility. Let's face it, for greater American, the black Muslims are a joke.
Yeah.
They're slightly a threat, but as far as Islam goes, or black people go, they're powerless.
Yeah, people don't see it as a real religion.
Yeah.
They don't.
It's an alien force, right?
What do you mean by black Muslims?
Muslims who are black or black Muslims, or Mexican Muslims, or Vietnamese Muslims. This does not mean anything to mainstream America, which is changing now, thank God.
Yeah.
But historically, from let's say up to the 50s or something, this is the disenfranchised. That doesn't worry people. Omar.
Yeah, it's true.
If I insulted you, I'm sorry. If you're angry, I'm sorry.
I am not angry.
Yeah. You're not angry?
Shake and make up that you're driving. Okay.
Right. We don't want you to have an accident.
Okay, we straight on
You don't
this
worry
one?
about me being angry. When he gets angry, that's when you got a problem.
Yeah, really.
Me?
Yeah, he gets angry. He'll stop the car and say, "Get out." he gets angry.
Omar, remember, I am from the Sudan. Remember this.
That black blood runs in his veins.
I am from the
Yeah,
Sudan.
he'll stop the car and say, "Okay, Omar, get out."
Don't forget, Omar, I'm an African American.
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, let's get this straight.
Yeah, look at the way he touches.
You are an African American.
I am an African American.
He turban like a Sudanese, man.
If he's an African American, I'm an African American.
And he got a bad
Can't argue
attitude.
with that.
He gets a bad, you know, he gets mad. This guy gets mad. He won't even speak to me.
Well,
Are we done with the list?
Yes, good.
Okay, all right, let's move on. Move on.
Marginalized populations in Iran and early Arabia, and it's Hindus in northern India. You know, the untouchable caste system and all that. They made up the largest, earliest segments of the Muslim population.
Mainly because you think that, like, you know, poverty and hard times tends to be conducive to working on a spiritual path.
Any sociological theory falls short. Omar just pointed out Ali and Abu Bakr.
Well, Abu Bakr is one of the richest people.
So that blows any theory. I can't theorize, but the
You always ask my question.
it leads to all kinds of problems.
People always ask, why more whites Muslim, and why do blacks go to Islam? I mean, it's like...
That's an important question.
It's an important question, but, I mean, is there an answer to it?
Yeah, you're also saying about you know, the Christian influence in America. Well, it's a country founded on Christian principles. You weren't sort of Christian bashing or anything, were you?
You know, I'm really trying to retrace my thought before Omar blew up there.
Why you call me a slave?
I I did not. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon.
You gotta be bourgeois.
I beg your pardon. I did not.
I'm just saying.
Call you a slave.
Well,
Omar.
indirectly.
Yeah.
No, not even indirectly.
You can't be bourgeois.
Sorry, I didn't.
It's a sensitive point.
You call me a marginal person.
You've spoken about, reverse discrimination and all this. I mean, you took the other end of it and ran with it. So,
no, I didn't. No, I run into it all the time.
Yeah, no, sure, you do.
This is important.
I thought you're white too, I run into it all. But that's only in California because y'all make up a large proportion. Out there in the real world.
The real world. Outside of California?
Yes, well, outside, hey look, outside the Sufi orders is blacks 10 to 1 at least.
Muslims.
It's a different thing.
It's more important.
Sufi orders, I'm a token.
Let me get back. You called yourself a token.
Every order I went to where they doing fiqh, I'd be the only white black there, or maybe one other, and I'd be like.
Let's get back to my point.
Sure. Hey, why don't you go back to your point?
What is my point? About marginalized societies. How can we break down the filtering system, which of course we're all concerned about.
And desirable as
Well, I noticed that I personally am more a threat to non-Muslims than, say, my wife,
Yeah.
And it's because, for what we call mainstream America, which is no longer true, that's now a dated term, for the power brokers in America, if you look just like them, you're more of a threat. And on the other end, for younger people, you're a threat in the sense that you're an example of somebody who's gone on a different path than the corporate executive. You've gone on a Muslim path. See, they could ignore Malcolm X, Omar. They can ignore Farrakhan.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah.
But if Joint Chiefs of Staff converts to Islam, I don't care what color he is, that's a threat. And I'll give you an example. Somebody in Egypt, no names, converted to.
He respects Farrakhan's ideas about self-educating, taking care of yourself, and all that kind of stuff.
Who said that? Jesse Jackson?
No, heck no.
It's up to us to break down those barriers. Converts. I use that word advisedly. It's up to converts to break down those barriers. Because we have.
How about saying new Muslims?
New Muslims. How about that? It's up to new Muslims.
Yeah,
okay. It's up to new Muslims. Thank you. Actually, in Arabic, you say Muslimin Jadidin. It's true. New Muslims. Omar's right. New Muslims to wake up Westerners out of their historical amnesia. I mean, the church did it with papal bulls. And to be honest with you, the last war has proved that they have this down to an art. This filtration system. The 250,000 plus that were massacred. It wasn't a war, by the way, it was a massacre.
Yeah.
It was a massacre. People are sleeping on that event. People will not understand what actually happened because it was a massacre in Iraq.
Oh, okay.
We have not come to terms with the massacre. I mean, in 19th century Britain, what they did to the Sudanese, at least there was also a massacre, by the way. You have to go back to 1886 to find that kind of massacre perpetrated on human beings. Nothing can compare to it. Not World War I, not World War II, on defenseless human beings. And the slaughter of wholesale slaughter of innocent civilians and retreating soldiers. I mean, the list goes on and on. People are suffering. That's part of the historical amnesia. I mean, everybody understands what happened with Mussolini in the tanks and with with spears. But hey, Mussolini was a fascist bad guy, and the Africans happened to be a tiny little Christian minority. Good guy. Christian, therefore good. If those Ethiopians had been Muslim, believe me, we wouldn't know about it. And the proof of this is an Amnesty International. 4,000 are killed in Assam. So what? Assam, you talk about Assam, where's that? 4,000 people? Compare that to Klinghoffer. I just heard on the news they're making an opera out of Klinghoffer. I object strenuously what happened to Klinghoffer, but that was one man, one time, by a bunch of terrorists. Let's face it. But 250,000. We should be weeping.
Can I ask a question?
Are you weeping?
Huh?
Yes.
Yes, he's weeping.
Okay, now
Ask your question.
with regard to the statement you made, and I'm just trying to get filled in a little better on this. Okay, now if marginal these ethnic groups, right? That marginal ethnic groups that do not represent mainstream America, right?
Poor.
Okay, that coming into Islam or so forth, so really don't represent a threat, but the more upper class, middle class, they represent mainstream America, middle class really, working class, middle class, white, more or less, is really where the threat is. Then why weren't Americans threatened by Hinduism?
That's a good question.
I was thinking about it too. Not Buddhism.
Buddhism.
Not Buddhism.
Hinduism.
Hinduism. Definitely Hinduism.
They worried the hell. All they did was worry you to death.
You know, it's a joke. I mean, I think even the British know more about this than the Americans. The Americans know the third world, what they call the third world, like they were living in 1776. I think history stopped as far as non-European civilization. They're the most backward understanding of other countries. It's shocking. I mean, geography is just in the shambles. I think even the British know more, or the Germans know more about it.
That's a good point.
I mean, talk about 17th century anthropology. You know what the idea of the typical American idea of a Hindu is? They don't eat cows. The fact that they slaughtered the Muslims all over Sri Lanka, they destroyed their temples, they starve them to death every day. The nice little Hindus don't eat cows. They're pacifists. That's because of the bald-headed guy. That's you ask them, how many Hindus do you know? Indira Gandhi was the witch of the third world, putting martial law. I talked to escapees in Montreal, Canada, that escaped from the police after the Hindu police came in and slaughtered their whole family. They wouldn't tell me their real name because they were so frightened. Now I'm getting upset, Omar. Let me tell you about Hindus and 8-year-old child brides. Dude, do you ever ask a Hindu, you're a Hindu, why are you so mean to women? 8-year-old brides marry Brahmin priests. And nobody ever talks about bride burning. They say it's gone. Can I say BS on camera? Those customs are thousands of years old. Brides are burned, or as good as burned, because they can't remarry under Hindu law. Women can never ever enter a tomb. A Brahmin place of worship, ever.
They're like shrines, aren't they?
Ever. Where are women prohibited in the whole world from entering mosques? India. And you know who they blame? The Muslims. The Hindus blame the Muslims. That's why the Hindus treat women so badly. Let me tell you something. 5,000 years ago, when the Indo-Iranians came across from the Caucasian mountains on the Indo-Iranian plateau and become Zoroastrians, they fed upper-class women from a stick in a cage while they menstruated. Zoroaster said the only reason Ahura Mazda created a woman was because he couldn't find a better vessel to create boys and men than a woman. That's God's excuse for the creation of women. You want to talk about Aryan people's treatment of women? You have to look at history. Do not blame Islam. The first religion to give women property rights and inheritance rights and not to treat them like chattel was Islam. The first holy book to specify a portion of inheritance rather than saying, according to Semitic law, the wife was inherited by the brother.
Say that again. We didn't say abortion. We said apportion.
Apportion, apportion. A portion.
Apportionment of...
A fraction, a specific...
In terms of...
Let's talk about the Moorish Empire. Am I on?
Let's talk about the Hindus today. The Hindus today.
Forget the Hindus.
I want to catch before we get to history is like, talking about, how Islam can become, more palatable in, like, America. You said that you perceived that you were a greater threat than maybe your wife. So, maybe that way comes through, like women working.
No, also, yes, from Brazil, and also, she doesn't speak English very well.
Oh, I see.
I was talking about marginalized groups.
Yeah, but now, women in Islam, stick out in this country like a sore thumb anyway, so
yeah, well, I had to say something about the Moorish Empire, because Omar, it's really important.
Right.
I took a digression. Let's take our digressions one at a time.
Right.
One way to wake up Westerners to Islam is Islamic roots. What is the greatest European Islamic civilization? What was?
Andalusia.
Right. The Moorish Empire, the pearl of Islamic civilization. And it was great and glorious, extremely tolerant of Jews, as well as Christians and gypsies.
First time blacks weren't discriminated against.
These people were the most, by the way, the most advanced technologically in the world at their time. The most. It was African, it was European, and it was Middle Eastern at the same time.
Right.
It was the most tolerant civilization by far. And let me tell you what wiped out this civilization. The Inquisition. Okay?
Spanish Inquisition.
The Spanish Inquisition was Christianity's answer to the Moorish Empire.
But why did the
and you know what this
do that? Because the
Christians
were involved in
I read a paper once where in Valencia the Christians tried to recreate the tolerance in a Christian empire, and it failed. It failed because the Christians in charge of the church at that time must be compared with the Muslims who are in charge of Islam at that time. And you will find an enormous contrast. And Houston Smith once told me, at the same time as that civilization was crumbling under Christian influence, the Inquisition, the Christian influence of Byzantium, the Christian civilization of Byzantium was crumbling under the Turks. And to this day, the Metropolitan, the head of a Christian Orthodox Church, lives in Istanbul. You must compare the Inquisition to the Turkish rule of Byzantium and the Balkans. You will see black and white as a difference. You will see the Inquisition is the answer, the Christian invasions, and the Ottomans are the answer to Muslim invasions. And any historian will see the difference. I could name you some historians, but never mind.
So the Spanish Inquisition, I mean, I've always heard about this, but I don't really know much about what the deal was. What
the deal was?
The deal was they burned people. After they converted to Christianity, there was an inquisition, it was an inquiry into the sincerity of their faith, which is impossible in Islam, by the way.
They did it. What was it? Tell them about the thing.
They burned babies alive.
What about women?
They raped women. They tortured them.
Witches, man.
They tortured them until they confessed. Read the Inquisition yourself. You'll see the most incomprehensible cruelty of man's inhumanity to man before the 20th century. Of course, the 20th century, it's all Inquisition, by the way.
20th century.
It's a first world Inquisition of third world.
It's blacks and slavery.
Yeah, that's it. Well, let's get back to roots. Before this was destroyed,
The point is,
Islamic
if
roots.
we want to get rid of a wife during the Inquisition, all they do is go tell somebody this is practicing witchcraft.
Yeah, right. So they have to inquire and...
Oh, no, they didn't really inquire, man. I mean, what did she have to do?
And if she sinks, she was okay, and if she floats, she's a witch, right?
And it was men, it was
all.
gypsies, it was Jews, it was Muslims.
Undesirables?
But mostly Muslims. Mostly. The majority of Muslims. And after 1492, when the last inconvertibles, were they call them, rode across to Morocco, there was one more revolution in the Sierra Nevada by a Muslim, and they were all wiped out. They killed every single man, woman, and child.
Well, no, wait a minute now. If the Spanish Inquisition is an inquiry into faith, how come so many Muslims are wiped out? What was the answers that they gave wrong?
This is one of those
into faith,
situations.
I mean,
it's like a black in the South being pulled over in Mississippi in 1943. There is no way to win.
Yeah, right.
You know, there is no magic answer.
Here's a magic answer. I lived in the village in Brooklyn. I mean, and you see Berkeley Village.
Yeah.
Bilal. There was a black guy that came in there who was a flasher. He'd take off his clothes and show women his private parts, and then put his coat back on. The woman described him as being black, a little tall, with a beard.
Yeah.
They drew a picture up. Every time I went in the village to come home from school, the police would stop me.
Right.
Just because I had hair on my face and I was black. That's it. The same, I mean, it just got to be the point where I had to complain to the police, and it still went on. One day I asked the guy, I said, and it's probably going a little, I said, you need probable cause. And he pulled his gun out, put it up to my head, and said, this is my probable cause. I said, I accept it.
So the Inquisition is still going on.
Yeah, right.
It's a mentality.
Yes.
It's a monolithic mentality. Alexander the Great. You can blame the Greeks for the monolithic mentality. The Muslims go in, they set up taxes, they say don't disturb the farms, we're collecting, 5% taxes. Churches, okay. Synagogues, okay. Just give us our money and we'll be fine. Alexander the Great goes in there, wipes out all the agriculture, every building that he can get a hold of, and says this is a Greek civilization. So they build columns, in Mauritania and stuff like that. It's a difference in mentality.
yeah.
It says my group is only going to go get saved, and everybody else is going to hell.
Yeah, right.
Right? Yeah. No one but a Hellenized Christian could even suggest that. Islam says all the Ahl Kitab are fine, just give us our taxes, and we're the best, the foremost, but you're fine too. And there's still Christian minorities. Like in Syria, half of Lebanon is Christian. Did you ever think about that?
Good one, man. I got a good one. Genghis Khan goes in, tells people, say, we all going to hell. Everybody else is going to heaven, so we're going to kill you all.
That's the truth.
We all going to hell, so we just, everybody that's not Mongolian of my people, we it's the opposite side of the coin,
So what are the roots of Western Islam? It's Andalusia. And to this day, new Muslims have a thing about North Africa. By the way, they all got kicked out and went to North Africa. The flower of that civilization bloomed again to a lesser extent in North Africa, in Fez, Morocco. And it still has an emotional, this is an emotion, okay? An emotional pull. Now, what's the most Sufiized place in the universe?
Konya.
Konya. That's a few guys doing whirling dervish. With the most fascist, repressive government. Oh boy, I've cut that out. In the world, that's Turkey.
Okay, tell me, where's
you think it's bad in the village? We should go to Turkey.
Yeah, I know nothing. It's just a name,
Where is Sufi involvement? As one guy, Abdul Ghani, said, it's like water and clay. It's molded into the culture. Morocco, Yemen, Sudan, lesser known, Afghanistan before the Russians. That's Islam and Sufi.
After, really.
and after. Well, it's a heart. It's an emotional connection.
Like Qadariya is like almost everybody's almost.
Where were all the tourist hippie Muslims going in the 60s and 70s? Morocco, Afghanistan, Marrakesh. We remember. This is creepy to say this, but Omar knows I'm a creep. We remember Islamic roots. That's what black Muslim Americans and white Muslims have in common. Now I'm talking for Omar now.
No, you got a problem there. Wahhabis got to us, man.
Listen, every African American, even though it's distant, remembers that past.
Yeah, he does.
You know, it's in the blood. It's in your veins and your heart. You weep for that lost stuff. I can't say it in English, but in Portuguese it's called saudade. It means being a stranger in a strange land. It means loneliness of the soul. Cut it off from your motherland. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You walk around with this burden when you're awake. Well, that's what white Muslims, European Muslims feel
blacks
about.
are more tolerant towards Islam too, you know?
It is.
I never thought about that.
It is.
Because they everybody, Islam they're very tolerant. Somebody in their family is connected, or they have a relative or something like that, you know what I mean?
That's the only population in America where Islam is not an alien entity, is in black America. Everybody has a sister named Rashida.
Yeah, somebody.
How can you look?
Recently,
Isn't it?
60s. Man, there's so many Muslim names.
Isn't it? So only black American subculture is, I hate to say integrated, but you know what I mean, into the Islamic milieu.
Bismillahir Rahmaanir Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Rahmaanir Rahiim Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين